Welcome to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Marie Goy in Singapore. The headlines. A relatively low-key military parade from North Korea playing down tensions ahead of the Winter Olympic opening ceremony. The reason why two Reuters journalists are on trial in Myanmar. New revelations about military killings and a mass grave.
I'm Kasia Madeira in London. Also in this programme, scrambling for votes to spend hundreds of billions of dollars. American lawmakers argue over another government shutdown. And the joy of a new superhero film with an almost entirely black cast.
Live from our studios in Singapore and London. This is BBC World News. It's Newsday.
Good morning. It's 9 a.m. here in Singapore, 1 a.m. in London and 10 a.m. in Pyeongchang, where the Winter Olympics are due to begin in just a few hours. In an apparent olive branch, North Korea is sending a delegation to the Games. But relations don't seem to have thawed just yet. Early on Thursday, Pyongyang put on a massive military parade displaying the latest intercontinental ballistic missiles. Our correspondent at the Games is Laura Bicker.
All hail to the general. They shout in numbers. Tens of thousands of loyal soldiers display their adulation, and they are rewarded with rare words from their leader.
At a time like this, when the US and its followers are making such a fuss around the Korean Peninsula, our military should remain on high alert and step up preparations for a fight.
Peeking from behind the pillar is Kim Jong-un's influential sister. She'll be the first ever member of the Kim dynasty to travel south and will represent the regime at the Winter Olympics. On display were missiles that Kim Jong-un claims can reach the US. It's bound to heighten tensions on the eve of a Winter Games that South Korea had hoped would be known as the Peace Olympics. Just a few hundred miles away in Seoul, the US Vice President is meeting the South Korean leader with a message of his own. The US wants President Moon to keep up the pressure on the North and has announced an increase in sanctions. Earlier, as he addressed troops in Japan, he warned Pyongyang that US warships and squadrons stand ready.
Let the world know we will defeat any attack and meet any use of conventional or nuclear weapons with a response that is rapid, overwhelming and effective.
This small village, 50 miles from the North Korean border, will stage the latest chapter of a tense 70-year-old drama. As the athletes parade into the stadium, all eyes will be on the politicians in the grandstand. The sporting events have yet to start, but the propaganda games are well underway. North Korea's charm offensive has arrived in the form of what is known here as an army of beauties. Chosen for their looks, intelligence and loyalty to the regime, they are the pin-ups of Pyongyang. Han So-hee is a former member and was part of an elite group which performed for Kim Jong-un's father.
We were supposed to promote the North Korean ideology. We were not only to cheer, but we were to go into combat at the heart of our enemy and show off our pride and the greatness of our country.
In the battle for public opinion in South Korea, this display is far more powerful than any missile. It has raised hopes. Whatever the North's future intentions, the Olympics have provided a unique opportunity, and they found it too tempting to turn down. Laura Bicker, BBC News, Pyeongchang.
And we will be talking to our correspondent Stephen McDonnell, who is in Pyeongchang live in just a few minutes' time. So stay with us for that. But now let's take a look at some of the day's other news, because a bipartisan deal to keep US government departments open beyond midnight in the US could be in trouble. A last-minute intervention by this man, the Republican Senator Rand Paul, is likely to delay a vote in the Senate and increase the likelihood of another government shutdown. The spending plan was agreed by leaders of both parties and also approved by the White House, but some Republicans say that they are concerned about the deal's implications for the country's national debt. Well, our North American correspondent Peter Bowes joins us live from LA. My goodness, Peter, I thought we've just marked Groundhog Day, and yet here we are again. What's going on?
Yes, you're right. The second time in 3 weeks. America facing the prospect of a government shutdown. It did happen last time, but it only lasted for about 3 days. We're back in the same situation again, although it is a little bit different because the bill that the politicians are negotiating and about now is agreed by both parties, as you said, and has also been given approval by the White House. The sticking point seems to be the extra spending that it includes, some $300 billion on defense and domestic spending that some Republicans are uneasy about, and Rand Paul especially. He is a Republican from Kentucky. He's been on the Senate floor demanding an amendment to this bill to change it to, as he would see it, to water it down somewhat. He objects to this as he sees it excessive spending, and the fact that he has done that has delayed the timetable. His amendment probably wouldn't be successful, but it's delayed everything. If it goes beyond midnight, perhaps up to 1 o'clock in the morning, once again this country is facing the prospect of a shutdown.
Oh, Peter, a long night for you then in that case. Peter Bowes in LA, thank you very much as always. Well, also making news today, a series of aftershocks in Taiwan have been hampering efforts to find survivors of an earthquake on Tuesday, which struck the popular tourist city of Hualien. At least 10 people are known to have been killed by the 6.4 magnitude quake. 7 are still missing. US officials say that Syrian Kurdish fighters have captured 2 British members of a notorious Islamic State cell linked to the beheading of Western hostages. They've been named as Alexander Koti and El Shafi Al-Sheikh from London. They were the last of a group of 4 nicknamed the Beatles because of their British accents. Tokyo stocks dropped more than 3% in early trading. This comes after the Dow plunged again on Thursday, falling by around 1,000 points, just over 4%. European stocks also closed down as investors appeared skittish after this week's financial turmoil. The court in Cambodia has granted bail to 7 of the 10 foreign tourists who were charged last month with producing pornographic images. The group were arrested after a raucous pool party in Siem Reap. If convicted, they could face up to a year in a Cambodian prison. India's Supreme Court has ordered the government to produce a long-term plan for protecting one of the country's most precious landmarks, the Taj Mahal. The World Heritage Site faces a range of challenges, including smog and also the impact of millions of visitors. The social media giant Twitter has made its first ever profit in the 3 months to the end of December. It racked up just over $91 million. But the firm has also reported no increase in its total number of monthly users. And crew aboard the International Space Station played a game of badminton in zero gravity. The doubles match took place around 400 kilometers above Earth between astronauts from Russia, from America, from Japan, as the space station orbited at over 61,000 kilometers per hour, and they did well.
Well, let's return to our top story now. In the countdown to the Winter Olympics, Stephen McDonnell is in freezing Pyeongchang. A few hours to the opening ceremony. What's the mood there?
Oh, well, people are really excited here in Pyeongchang. You can imagine after all those years of preparation, here we are on opening ceremony day. Now that means soon we're going to see these elite athletes competing in these mountains. But before that, we have to get through the opening ceremony, which is bound to be completely fascinating. I mean, you have the father of Otto Warmbier, who died controversially following him being picked up in North Korea. We've got the US Vice President there pushing this kind of, United States propaganda line, challenging the North Koreans. And on the other hand, we've got the North Korean leader's sister there, and these 2 teams coming in together, the North and South Korean teams coming together with a flag with an image of the Korean Peninsula rather than both those countries' flags. There's even some talk that possibly they could jointly light the Olympic flame. Now, that would be something. Either way, all this symbolism is absolutely incredible, given how frosty relations have been on the Korean Peninsula in recent times. Now, that's not to say that everybody here is completely happy about this engagement with North Korea at the Winter Olympics. There is divided opinion. Some people think this is a great step forward and others are pretty worried about it. So to give you a bit of an idea of the flavour of views in Pyeongchang, we went out and spoke to some people and asked them about how they felt about this engagement with North Korea, and here's some of what they had to say.
많은 어른들은 조금 안 좋은 쪽으로 많이들 하시더라고요. 한국인데 왜 태극기가 안 올라가고 한 번 더 올라가냐 이렇게 얘기가 많은데
남북 관계가 좋아진다 그러면 그다음에 큰 도움이 되지 않을까 그렇게 생각합니다.
우리나라가 개최하는 건데 우리나라 태극기도 지금 못하고 한반도기로 하잖아요. 그러니까
저는 이번 올림픽 기회로 하나가 되는 느낌으로 통일이 됐으면 좋겠다라고 하는 간절한 바람을 말씀드리고 싶습니다.
남북이 상황이 좋지 않은데 조금 더 긍정적인 방향으로 갈 수 있지 않을까?
서로가 조금 눈이 녹듯이 살살 너무 확 녹는 건 아니고 서서히 녹아갔으면 좋겠어요. 이번 기회를 통해서.
Well, you know, there's a lot of discussion about it, but either way, the engagement is happening. We've had confirmation that Kim Yo-jong, that's the North Korean leader's sister, will be meeting with Moon Jae-in, the South Korean president. That'll be happening the day after the opening ceremony, and there are high hopes that just maybe these Winter Olympics could bring a greater understanding between the North and South Korea after all that tension that we've been having here.
Stephen McDonald in Pyeongchang. Stay warm and enjoy the opening ceremony. You're watching Newsday on the BBC. Stay with us. Two Reuters journalists are on trial in Myanmar, and there have been new revelations about military killings and a mass grave.
Also coming up on the programme, the sheer joy about the new film Black Panther. The action-adventure features an all-black cast.
Welcome back to Newsday on the BBC. I'm Marie Goy in Singapore.
And I'm Kasia Madeira in London. Our top stories this hour. A North Korean official under international sanctions, Cho Fi, has been allowed by the United Nations Security Council to travel to the Winter Olympics in South Korea.
The Reuters news agency has revealed details of a mass killing of Rohingya Muslims by soldiers and villagers in Myanmar, which it says lies behind the imprisonment of two of its journalists there. Now let's take a look at some of the front pages from around the world, and we start with the Japan Times, which has its report on US Vice President Mike Pence, who was in Japan before he went to South Korea for the Winter Olympics Games. His speech describing what he called the unprecedented strength of the Japan-US alliance. Speaking to American troops stationed at Yokota Air Base in western Tokyo, Mr. Pence said that the two allies were bound together by their unshakable commitment to freedom. And let's show you the China Daily, which says its winter sports ambitions will see a major test in Pyeongchang, which is starting shortly. But the newspaper suggests that learning over winning will set the tone for the country's athletes and developing athletic prowess by the time of Beijing 2022. And finally, France's Le Figaro has a front page story on how Parisians are rediscovering the snows of winter. The paper says it's a chance for cities' skiers to improve their skills on the piste. Now, Kasia, what story is getting people talking online?
Well, Mariko, we're coming up to Valentine's Day, but we're expecting loads of positive stories. But actually, there's a bit of a negative story coming out about that, because here in the UK, there's a supermarket chain called Sainsbury's, which has been criticised for pricing Valentine's Day cards according to gender. So, to buy a card for your wife, for example, it will cost around £2. That's roughly around $2, for example. Whereas to buy a near identical card for your husband, it will cost you £2.50, so a little bit more. Yes, controversial. The supermarket is saying that they are rectifying the problem.
Now, in December last year, 2 Reuters journalists were arrested in Myanmar, Hwa Lon and Jo So-woo. They're still in jail awaiting trial for allegedly obtaining confidential government documents. It was known that the 2 journalists were covering the aftermath of some of the brutal violence inflicted on the Rohingya last year. But since their arrest, rumors have been circulating around what those journalists were investigating. And today, Reuters have published what they believe is the real reason for their arrest, revealing details of the story that they were working on, a detailed investigation into a mass execution in a village in eastern Myanmar. James Clayton from Newsnight has the story.
On the 12th of December last year, 2 Myanmar journalists working for the Reuters news agency, Hwa Lon and Cheo So-oh, travelled to a restaurant in northern Yangon to meet 2 police officers. They never came home. They were arrested and later charged under the Official Secrets Act for allegedly obtaining confidential documents. They're being held in a jail in Yangon. Reuters have published what they believe was the real reason for their journalists' arrest, an investigation that focused on the village of Indin. The violence that took place here in late August and early September last year was echoed across parts of northern Rakhine State. This image shows the extent to which the Rohingya part of the village was burnt to the ground. Only the Buddhist area to the top left was spared. But what Reuters claimed to have found was even darker. Their journalists had been told by a number of sources that 10 men had been picked out of a crowd of Rohingya Muslims and executed. Reuters say that after a day of interrogation they were led into a wood. Reuters say this image was given to their journalists by a local Buddhist. We've decided to blur parts of the graphic image. Back in Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, at around the same time as the arrests, Myanmar authorities were themselves looking into the execution. On the 10th of January, the military announced on its Facebook page that they'd undertaken their own investigation and that soldiers and local Buddhists had indeed taken part in an execution. But the military were forced to kill the Bengali terrorists, they said, because police stations were being attacked by Rohingya militants and it was unsafe to transport them. A decision was made to kill them, says the military statement. But Reuters say that Buddhist villagers their journalists interviewed reported no attack by a large number of insurgents on security forces in Indin, or that the 10 men had any connection with terrorism. The news agency claims their journalists also gathered unique evidence of military involvement in attacks on Rohingya Muslims, speaking to not only local villagers in Indin, but police officers and members of the paramilitary. Reuters believe that the evidence the journalists obtained is the real reason for their arrest. But the Myanmar authorities are continuing to pursue charges against the 2 journalists. Will telling this story help Hwa Lon and Cheo So-oh? We'll find out in court.
That's James Clayton reporting there. Well, the Myanmar government spokesperson has told Reuters that we are not denying the allegations about violations of human rights and we are not giving blanket denials. The government said that if there were strong and reliable primary evidence of abuses, they would investigate. They added, and then, if we found the evidence is true and the violations are there, we will take the necessary action according to our existing law. The government defended their operation in Rakhine. The international community needs to understand who did the first terrorist attacks. If that kind of terrorist attack took place in European countries, in the United States, in London, New York, Washington, what would the media say? Well, a little earlier I spoke to the president and editor-in-chief of Reuters, Steve Adler, and also to Dr. Rosanna Allen-Khan, who's a member of Parliament here in the UK and who has also worked as a doctor in Rohingya refugee camps in Bangladesh.
We believe this was a story of global importance and that we had a responsibility to publish it. And our journalists in prison, Hwa Lon and Jo So-woo, fully support our decision to do this. It's essentially what journalists do. If you're going out there and reporting a story that really matters to people, you've got to publish it. People have to find out about it, and I think people who saw those images just now and heard the report will recognize this is something the world really needs to know about.
Dr. Allen-Khan, the government, the Myanmar government, have said that they're not giving blanket denials. What do you make of that?
I think, first of all, the evidence that has come to light tonight is very much in keeping with the testimonies that I heard when I was in the refugee camps, as well as the injuries that I saw as a doctor. I currently do not trust that the Myanmar government are going to conduct the necessary investigations. This marks a very important turning point. This is the first time we are hearing from the perpetrators of these crimes themselves, and I am certain that more such evidence is going to come to light.
Steve Adler, the government has, in their statement to you, they defended their operation in Rakhine. They talked about terrorist attacks, but of course your two journalists, the evidence that they heard, disputed any form of terrorist attack.
Right, we're trying to report in an unbiased, independent way, so it's not a matter of us being for or against the government. It's more a matter of trying to find out exactly what was happening on the ground. And you'll note, and people who see the story on Reuters.com will see that it's sourced traditionally. We interviewed lots and lots of people, and I think one of the things so unique about the story is we interviewed Buddhist villagers, we interviewed members of the police and security forces, and we interviewed Rohingya Muslims. And the story that emerges from that is the story that we tell. And I think it's very compelling and very strongly backed by the facts.
Tell us a little bit more about the people that your journalists spoke to, because there were a wide breadth of people, including Buddhist villagers.
Right, and we think this was the first time that really a story like this got sourced, both by talking to Buddhists who were involved and in some cases were quite unhappy or quite concerned about what happened, and also to the military and the police, some of whom we identified by name as being involved in this. So it's not just a matter of talking to victims and hearing their stories and relying on them solely, but it's a matter of checking them against people who were Buddhist and who were security forces. And again, the story that emerged was a collective story that they all told. And the pictures that I know are very disturbing and very gruesome, but they support that as well. And I think that's part of the significance. Just to mention another thing I found very moving and powerful in this story, we identified all of the 10 people who were massacred, and we did a little bio on each of them, a little biography on each of them. They're real people. They're shopkeepers, they're fishermen, they're fish sellers. 2 of them are students under 18 years of age, and these were people who got caught up in this and who got executed.
Now, the latest superhero film from Marvel had its European premiere in London on Thursday night, but what makes it different is it's a predominantly all-black cast playing the heroes. The films have become a sensation on social media, with many fans using the hashtag #WhatBlackPantherMeansToMe. Lisa Mazinder has the story.
A free cinema trip would have been welcome enough for these American schoolchildren. Their sheer joy is because the movie will be Black Panther. Such is the film's significance, people around the world are crowdsourcing money so that children who might not otherwise get the chance can get to watch it on the big screen. People like actress Jade Anuka from Peckham in London, who so far raised around £4,000 for a screening at her local cinema.
I think it's just a film that you don't really see. You don't really see black superheroes in a big blockbuster. I think the positive representation of that is really good for people growing up in this area, but I think all over the world.
We are home. Black Panther is being seen as a cultural milestone. A predominantly black cast leading a big budget blockbuster.
You get to decide.
And a film that also puts strong women right at its heart.
Black Panther is a moment, and hopefully it's one that will obviously exist for longer than this particular moment. What we want is that momentum to keep going, you know. I don't think it is Black Panther's responsibility to change the world. The change will come from the people who see it and choose to make a difference in their own lives.
For many, it's the kind of film they've been waiting decades for Hollywood to make. How important was it for you making sure this was primarily a piece of entertainment, even with this huge amount of social responsibility that was inevitably going to come into the equation?
I mean, that's what it is. You know, like that's what it is. It's not a, you know, it's not a political lecture. You know what I mean? Like, it's a movie. You know, and it's got to work as that.
And that is a movie that's already generating huge amounts of excitement for a new generation who've rarely seen themselves reflected in a film like this up on the big screen. Lisa Mzimba, BBC News.
Looking forward to seeing that from me and the team. Thanks for watching Newsday. Bye-bye.